In this video, I'm going to show you why New Year's resolutions are so difficult for most people to maintain. So to understand how this works, you need to understand a little bit about the human brain's dopamine system, and it's called the reward or pleasure system. And then we also have to understand how to properly engage our brains so we can stick with whatever resolution we choose with. So the first thing to know is that even a bad goal is better than no goal. The problem is that our brain acts diligently when we stick a goal in it and focus on the goal. So it's good to rapidly identify if your goal is a good one or not. So this is a picture of your brain. And so imagine if you were to put your hand right on your forehead, on the front of your head, right here. So that's right in your, just above your nose. Your nose is sitting right over here, someplace. So then you just peel your hand around the side of your head a little bit, and right in here is an area called your prefrontal cortex. You can see it right down in here in the aqua blue. Prefrontal cortex, see how big it is from the bottom. This is a bottom view of your brain, from our bottom front view, actually. Bottom front view. So this right here is where your forehead is. So this area, you can see, is called the prefrontal cortex. It is aqua marine looking, aqua color. It is the area of your brain that allows you to control behaviors that you would prefer not to control. So if you want to set a goal and be committed to it, you've got to regularly, constantly engage your prefrontal cortex. So what does the prefrontal cortex have to fight against? It has to fight against this dopamine system. So the VTA, you see here, projects dopamine. So dopamine is produced in this part of your brain stem. It's right above your spinal cord, right below your brain, this area in here. Two areas. Substantia nigra makes dopamine, and that's for movement. And most people hear about dopamine in the context of pleasure or then Parkinson's disease, because Parkinson's disease is a lack of dopamine neurons. But these two areas are separated, so your dopamine center in your midbrain is going to project to an area around in your frontal lobe area. Sorry if these are new words, it's just how it goes. It's called the nucleus accumbens. There you can see, nucleus accumbens. So dopamine, when it lands here, you get the excitement, the motivation. So how does this work actually? So you don't have to actually eat food or gamble or do anything that would get your dopamine system going, because it really doesn't work quite like that. So here's the best way to look at it. Just imagine you're sitting by yourself and someone shows you pictures of really tasty food. The pictures of the food makes you think about how much you like the food, and that is what drives the dopamine system. It's not the actual consumption that gets you the dopamine. Think about, let's just say you like going to the beach. So I like surfing, I like playing golf. We use my two examples, surfing and going to the beach. Surfing and golf. So going to the beach and going to the golf course. So if I'm thinking about going to the beach or going to the golf course, I get kind of like, kind of jacked up. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. Can't wait. I'm not there yet. I haven't experienced it yet. It's the can't wait to get there. I'm going to the golf course, or I'm going to the beach. That's dopamine. It's the motivation to realize whatever your desire happens to be. So a lot of people cheat. It gets their dopamine system going. Gambling, drugs, alcohol, money, greed, power, right? And then just endless consumeristic temptations. So why it's like watching television puts all of this into your head, right? Looking through the newspaper, magazines, flipping through the internet, you get all these endless stimuli. And depending upon how your brain is wired, one or more of these stimuli, just thinking about it or looking at it, is going to drive your dopamine system. And if that drive is strong enough, you are going to go and realize whatever the desire happens to be. So getting control of one's, or making a resolution and sticking with it, is really about learning how to control the dopamine system impulses that it gets when it is exposed to stimuli that we find pleasure from ultimately. So We have to protect our brains from our own thoughts and sensory input of all kinds, right? So you can be thinking about food and drive yourself to go off and eat 10 donuts, or you can look at some pictures. So it's what we see, smell, hear, and what we think that can do it. Huge issue, but what we're really talking about here is we have to protect our brains from our own dopamine system. Because if one of these issues, right, overeating, cheating, gambling, drugs, alcohol, doing anything for money, and doing anything for power, and shop, shop, shop till you drop, all of those, what they represent are stimuli to our dopamine system. So this means that we need to consciously avoid, so we have to use our prefrontal cortex to avoid these stimuli, because these stimuli, for some, are just way too powerful. And for some, they're not so much. So we must do that. So far I showed you how our dopamine system works and where it's located, right? There, we already saw that. Now we're going to look at a way to engage our brain so we can stick with our resolution and not let the dopamine system drive us absolutely nuts. So again, we are going to be talking here about the prefrontal cortex. I'm going to show you the battle that your prefrontal cortex, which is the area of your brain that allows you to control the dopamine drivers, or the dopamine, really it's the dopamine experience that is induced by these drivers. Okay, so let's look at some scientific papers to demonstrate that this is the spot that you must get control over. And everyone does it across the board, right? Everyone does it, engages their prefrontal cortex at different times. It depends upon how much importance you place on whatever activity it is that you're trying to stop yourself from doing. So just to say, well, I'm weak, that's not true. Lots of people who are just sitting on their couch pigging out are controlling themselves from going out and loading up their credit card. So if you can do that, you can control yourself from eating. It's all the same part of the brain. So don't make that any more complicated than it needs to be. So this is a paper published back in 2007, so 14 years ago. Resisting the Power of Temptations, the Right Prefrontal Cortex and Self-Control. So look what we're told here. The capacity, you can read the whole thing if you want, but the capacity to resist temptation, depends on the activity level of the right prefrontal cortex. So if you don't put goals in your head and put commitments in terms of behavior into your head, well, then it's very difficult to control any inappropriate behavior that is typically associated with a New Year's resolution. So here's how this works. Committing to your goals on a daily basis reinvigorates the right prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex loves goals. So let's take a closer look at the prefrontal cortex. So you may not recognize it because of different colors, but this area in here, the red, the yellow, and the blue, where you see PFC, prefrontal cortex, and prefrontal cortex. So we're going to look at the function of the medial, this is called the medial orbital, because it's near your eyes, prefrontal cortex. So what does it do? The medial orbital prefrontal cortex, it mediates socially aversive responses, it changes responses based on feedback, and inhibits, here it is, impulsive, automatic behaviors, or fear-driven amygdala responses. So the medial prefrontal cortex allows you to address stimuli that can either be fearful or pleasurable. It comes in from all sources. So even though, I'll just talk about these couple of X's right here. These are anatomical locations for vision. This is part of your visual system. This is part of your auditory system. And right here is your pleasure system. So the second you see or hear something that you want, boom, pleasure occurs. This is the pathway, the dopamine pathway. So that area, the nucleus accumbens is deeper inside behind this area here, or actually in front of it, I guess. So this is the area, the dopamine pathway, right in here. So we need to engage our prefrontal cortex. So it controls impulsive, automatic. So you go shopping and you go down the wrong aisle, and there you have in front of you cookies and ice cream and who knows what, and you got to control the automatic reach for it and the impulsiveness that you feel. Your medial prefrontal cortex can do it. It absolutely has the power to do it. Now, the thing about this, though, is you have to understand how strong this is. So this is a paper from 2009. The reason why I'm showing you this is because, so in this study, what they did is they looked at rats and they gave rats sugar-sweetened beverages, and then they were able to eliminate the taste receptors from the rats, so they couldn't taste sweet. Watch this in red. The mechanism by which food stimulates dopamine signaling is unclear. However, it does not appear taste receptors are required. So mice lacking sweet receptors are still able to develop a strong preference for sucrose solutions. So when you see that, you should think to yourself, well, I'm just a big rat and I want my sweets. Basically is the way you should look at this. And so if sugar and other tasty things, probably sweet, salty, fatty, salty, sweetie combo stuff, because it varies. Some people are more sweet-oriented with sugary, floury stuff, and then other people like the floury, salty stuff. Doesn't make any difference. Your brain is able to develop a preference for, we're using sucrose here, sugar, without even being able to taste it. That's how powerful this is. So you have to realize the playing field that you are dealing with, it is strong. It is very, very strong. And so the playing field, now this next picture I show, you're not going to understand most likely the anatomy, but just sit back for a second and then embrace what you're dealing with here. So this is, well, first look at the title of this article. Here's the title of this article. The neurobiology of food intake in an obesogenic environment. So we all live in an environment that drives us to become obese. And this is, now watch here, in red, conscious control of your behavior. Conscious, voluntary exercise, which you know you need to do. So you can see on the far right side what the behaviors that we need to do what? To stay healthy. And all this in here is our part of our dopamine system turning on, our reward system turning on. And you can see the stimuli, sight, smell, taste, and then memories. And then look at this, subconscious, behavioral, autonomic, endocrine control, but behavioral pushes you to do what you're fighting against. So you have to know that this is very strong neurobiology. It's designed to keep us alive during times of famine. So this is why we are hungry. It's a normal self-preservation biological mechanism, but it's not necessary when you have 7-Elevens around the corner and gas stations on every other corner with food in it. So we have to understand that we are at a loss. Our nervous system drives us to overeat in case of famine comes because our brain is like, still doesn't, that part of our brain, it has been around since the dawn of time. So that biology is hardwired, and now we live in an obesogenic environment that augments the power of the wiring. So you have to make a commitment. Now, have you ever seen this guy's name? I think it's pronounced Goethe. Anyway, this is a great quote about being committed. And so it was William Hutchinson Murray who made the quote, and you can see he's quoting Goethe here, but this is what William Hutchinson Murray said. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely, so you see, this is a definite thing. Anyone who's ever done this for health or for to do better at school, no matter what it is, the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. So now when we think about providence, it's typically divine providence. So if you are an atheist, then you can say the moment one definitely commits oneself, then awesome behavioral biochemistry moves too. All sorts of things occur to help when that otherwise would not have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, the commitment, the definite commitment, raises in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. So whether you like this quote or not, or heard it or not, anyone who's ever completely, definitely committed oneself, then all of a sudden it's a little bit easier. You can't be like partially committed. You can't be partially committed to follow through on a New Year's resolution when you're basically battling all kinds of behavioral neuroscience related to the dopamine pathway in an environment where there's just endless stimuli to overeat and pig out and not exercise. So you have to absolutely commit yourself to that. And when you do, the brain kicks in. So all that good prefrontal cortex anatomy kicks in to help you fulfill your goal. So let's talk about, this would be an example of committing to your resolution. Let's just say it's to lose weight and get healthy. You must understand the domain and the related roadblocks to success, because if you don't know they're coming, then you'll fall off quickly. The second you're walking through a mall and you're standing around in front of Cinnabon or Dunkin' Donuts and the smell is just like driving you nuts, well, you need to understand what to do in that moment. And in that moment, you got to keep walking. So that smell means you got to walk away. But if you're not committed and you haven't adequately engaged your prefrontal cortex, you're likely going to walk in there and down a few donuts and then feel guilty and have to deal with that later. So my suggestion would be to get a book that discusses this domain and the roadblocks. Now, I have, of course, wrote a book. You can look at mine if you wish. Otherwise, there are others out there. So another book is my diet book, obviously, and this has to do with understanding why all these foods are so problematic health-wise. So the other thing you need to do when you're dealing with your resolution and goal setting is you got to be specific. How much do you want to lose? So my brother here in this picture weighed 340. Now in this picture he weighs 190 and has so since 2000. Now by the way, he was 190 and then he developed a brutal case of spasmodic torticollis, also called cervical dystonia. He went from 190 to about 340 within like 4 or 5 years. And then he just couldn't take it anymore, and he just committed, and he dropped back to 190 and has been that way ever since, because he engages his brain properly. He engages his prefrontal cortex properly, so it's always on alert. And it's not like psycho, stressed out alert. It's just always alert and awake to protect his body from engaging in some type of, you can see, nefarious eating activity that we see down here on the cover of this book. So you have to be specific and choose a reasonable time frame to achieve the goal. He didn't just go from 340 to 190 overnight. It took 6 months to a year to do. So pressuring yourself will only lead to stress and failure and perhaps greater weight accumulation after you fall off the wagon. So you got to commit yourself, and your commitment has to be reasonable and then progress it. So you don't want to go, well, I'm going to go down to 190 when you're 340. Your first goal is to get to 300, then 250, and then on down the line. So you create realizable goals that you can achieve. Most important thing that you can do. And there's a bunch of other stuff you need to do. You need to organize your life so you can achieve and maintain your goals. So you want to list your goals and create activities that reinforce the weight loss and health goals, or whatever they are. Here's something that's really, really important. You can do as an example: no refined food calories in your house at all. No sugar, no flour, no refined oils, nothing. If you and your family want to eat this crap, you want to go get some French fries, you got to go out and get it. You want to eat some white bread, you got to go out and get whatever white bread sandwich you're going to get. You want to go get dessert, you got to go out and get dessert. Don't bring it in your house. If you do want to eat junk food, again, do it outside your house and do it once or twice a week. I mean, you can have a cookie a day if you want, but you just want to keep it out of your house. You want to keep your house clean, and then commit to a physical activity. You know, historically, in the old days, before there were 7-Elevens and everything, a couple hundred years ago, you had to actually go out and work for your food. You had to go hunt and gather. That was physically exhausting activity just to eat. Now that doesn't even remotely have to be involved. It's horrible how easy it is to become obese these days. So at home, without being obsessive and crazy, you want to track at least a couple markers of flame. So waist-to ratio and body mass index, very easy to track at home. And you can also track your glucose as well. Glucometers are cheap. If you want to get a ketone and glucose meter, you can get it from a place called, I'm not going to spell it, it's called Keto Mojo. Some guy developed a really great ketometer / glucometer, and a buddy of mine who's been checking him out feels that this is the best deal. So Keto Mojo, ketometer, glucometer, just go down to CVS or the other one, can't think of it right now, the other common, Walgreens. Yeah, there you go. Walgreens or CVS, where you can pick up a reasonably priced glucometer. And then you want to also engage in time-restricted feeding, which means you want to at least fast for 13 hours. Anyone can do this. Ultimately, just eat earlier at night and just wait it out. If you have to eat breakfast, make sure that you stop eating at 6 p.m. because if you wake up at 6 to eat, then you want to do that by 7 o'clock in the morning if you're going to be eating breakfast. So the longer we do time, and really the best goal is 16 hours. I discuss it in both of these books. And it's very popular. It's part of what they refer to now as intermittent fasting, although I think that time-restricted feeding speaks about it, because fasting is zero food. So, technically, if you're sleeping, you're intermittently fasting, but it's really better. Intermittent fast, I think a better language would be one day a week I don't eat anything. That's intermittent, no food. Time-restricted feeding is different. You just delay the time you're going to eat. You compress it into an 8-hour or an 11-hour window for eating. So, because we all live in an obesogenic environment, which promotes obesity and chronic disease, do not give up if you pig out on donuts one day or whatever. You go over to your friend's house, next thing you know, you downed, 3 or 4 or more beers and a big bag of chips because you're watching a football game. That can happen. That can happen. All you have to do if that happens is rethink your goals, reconnect yourself with your prefrontal cortex, and the next day you start again. So I mentioned before having a book like my Weight Loss Secrets book, so you understand the domains. Let me just show you a few more of those. So this is the back of the book. What do you learn in this book? Well, how the obesogenic environment makes you fat, how consumerist temptations make you fat, how your instinctual drive makes you fat, how stress, lack of sleep, inflammation, wrong gut bacteria all make you fat, how your body weight set point can make you fat, how your inner dietary crackhead makes you fat. And here you can see again how to use your prefrontal cortex, which we talked about in this video, to achieve and maintain proper body weight or to achieve any other New Year's resolution that you might be setting for yourself. So if you like this information, you want to pick up a copy of these books. They're available for single copies over at Amazon. And if you want to get volume copies for your practice or whatever business you have, here you go. Volume discs are available right through dflame.com, which is also how you can access all the social media stuff.